Okay. Great. Some people are still coming in, and when these people are sitting, we're going to start. I expected a smaller room. This is surprisingly big. Great. Did you? Well, the amount of the audience doesn't matter. It's the quality of the audience and the question being asked. So, but I'm very excited to have you all here. Did you all arrive well in St. Gallen? Yes. Did you all travel far? Yeah. Good. Whose first time is it at St. Gallen Symposium? Oh, wow. Wow. First timers. This is exciting. I heard so many people saying yesterday already, like how well organized this conference is, and I think the same. I've been here a couple of times as a journalist, now the first time as a host, and yeah, it's all so well set up. And great to have you all. Please take a seat. We're going to start. We're talking about industry transformation, orchestrating technology and organizational change today. This is a broad topic, of course. We also brought in a broad round of panelists. We have two people from the energy sector, Johannes Thijssen as Alpic's chairman, Vijayakumar from a disruptive startup in the energy sector, and we're bringing in CVK, as I was told I can call you, as HCL's CEO. They all have different backgrounds, but they all have some things in common. And these things are, of course, the rapid digitalization every industry is facing. They all have to face macroeconomic instabilities, and of course, also the workplace disruptions we are all seeing. And we will focus in the session on the energy sector, and we will try to explore how incumbents like Alpic and disruptors like Enapter can work together, and what role technology can bring to the table. We are starting, I think, with the session video before I'm introducing the panelists, or shall I introduce the panelists first? This is the... Shall I go? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, let's start with Vaitia first. Vaitia, you have a marketing and business background. You studied in Canada, and you're the co-founder of Enapter, which is an energy tech company manufacturing electrolysis for green hydrogen. And you're in the process of like scaling this up right now, and you also won several prizes for that. And I'd like to ask you, what is the one thing the audience should know about you, and what are you bringing to the table in this discussion?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be sharing the stage with these esteemed panelists. So, as mentioned, my name is Vaitia, one of the co-founders of Enapter. I think one thing that you would take away, I hope, from this is that our mission is to make green hydrogen affordable and accessible for everyone, and that we're working at high speed to disrupt the energy industry and also to bring an affordable alternative fuel to fossil fuels.
Thank you. CVK, you have an engineering background. You're HCL's CEO since 7 years. When I said like I'm having the CEO of HCLTech on my panel, many people ask me, what's HCLTech, which is absurd because you have like 25,000 employees worldwide. You're like a global company, 52 offices. You're basically in every industry, also in the energy sector. What should the audience know about you, and what are you bringing to the table?
Yeah. HCL Technologies, we are a global tech services company with operations in 50 countries, 225,000 people. What we do is help customers in their digital transformation journey. provide solutions and services which help clients across multiple industries to transform. That's what we do, and I hope to share some experiences.
You're hoping to say something?
No, I'm good.
Interesting? No? What it is? What are you bringing to the table in this discussion?
Yes, I think there's lots of learnings from different industries when it comes to the change management or really how are they really reinventing their business model. There are some commonalities as well, so I wish to share that.
Thank you. Johannes, last but not least, you have a law and economics background, I read. You have been the CEO of E.ON for quite some time, which HCLTech is also working with. But 2022, you joined Alpic as their chairman of the board. And Alpic is based in Switzerland, but it's serving most of the European countries, providing energy mainly from hydrogen and nuclear, if that's correct. And you've been considered a system-relevant company. So what should the audience know about you, and what are you bringing to the table in this discussion?
I would say the visible part is I'm representing the older generation. With 4 children and 3 grandchildren, it's a little bit depressive. The only upside is maybe some knowledge accumulated over life. What I would propose is that I've seen so many deep technology changes in energy. Energy always appears as a boring industry, but I've seen so deep changes in my life, from coal to nuclear to shale gas to renewables, now to hydrogen. And I've also seen so many organizational changes, from state-organized monopolies to liberalized, privatized companies, now to a technology and very dispersed environment. So what worries me sometimes how encrypted people think about energy, as if they know everything that now needs to happen, whilst my memory says every few years I got totally surprised. And maybe the end of history is still not there, neither in technology nor in organizational change, and maybe to stay open might be much smarter than to believe we just now need to deploy a story for the next 30 years.
This was already a perfect opening statement, could also have been already the closing statement, but we're putting some discussion in between.
I try to help.
Thanks for facilitating the discussion, Johannes. I'd like to ask you, we all agreed on an opening statement. I'd like to ask you one question, and then we're taking it from there. So we have Inapter as a disruptor in the energy sector, focusing on developing green hydrogen, which is amazingly difficult. We will explore why. At the same time, we have incumbents like Alpic who are challenged by disruptors like Vaitia's company, and Alpic on the other hand side has significant resources, an established customer base. I would like to know how these two types, what do you think, like how can these types of companies work together to drive industry transformation, and which role can technology play in this process? Who would like to start?
Always the youngest.
Well, thank you for the invitation. So yeah, I mean, I think you could frame it as a challenge, and could there be competition between the two of us? But actually, I would say there is a huge opportunity. The classic ethos of a startup scale-up for us now is speed, right? So I mean, our lead times for the production of our systems, because we are building, we're building electrolyzers, we're building hardware that will use electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then we're shipping those out to customers, for example, that are energy utilities or that are those working in other industries. And I think the big advantage here is that actually we're building these in a matter of weeks, which is unseen of in the industry today and the other electrolyzer manufacturers. So I think the opportunity to collaborate is when one wants to start working in hydrogen and start producing hydrogen and start gaining experience in hydrogen, either for their decarbonization plans or for their own activities in energy, and they want to just get started, this is when they would actually come to us. And I think that there's a huge opportunity here because some energy utilities don't actually want to produce electrolyzers. It's hard, it takes time, it's expensive. So why go through the effort of doing something that others have already been doing, that others have been doing successfully? I mean, we have 300 customers where we've shipped 4,000 electrolyzers in the world. We're active in 50 countries. So we've gained that experience. We have the network of system integrators, but we also have collected 10,000s and hours of energy data, actually, of how does our electrolyzer work. So we have so much experience to share and so much experience to learn, actually, from those who have been doing this for a long time and who can also understand the greater and the macro perspectives of, okay, so if you're going to integrate an electrolyzer, well, you might want to think about these certain requirements of, okay, let's plug in an electrolyzer into the grid, which is something that one might have more experience with, and then tell us what are the requirements that you would need in terms of the operating hours and the lifetime. And so I think this knowledge exchange of what do we provide and what others require is actually an opportunity for collaboration and speed.
I would say very often, from my past experience as more than a decade as CEO of E.ON, I'm also sitting on the board of BP, which is significantly bigger than Alpiq and quite dispersed. Very often, the cooperation between a big company and a startup develops as a fundamental misunderstanding. Good startups, do one thing great. And big incumbents try to balance many things good. And that is not the same. And often they just try to take advantage of each other. And it's not blaming any of the two sides. Startups often try just to use the base of the incumbent for something, it just helps them, be it the data, be it the grid knowledge, be it what else. And big companies often misunderstand startup as just plugging something in for me and then I can forget them again or I'll buy them. There's a lack of respect and a lack of basic understanding of the other side's true intent, ambition, and need. And if this cooperation would be based not just on what's in for me, but understanding, okay, let's see, what do you want? What do I want? How can we balance it? And how do we both get something out of it without one eating the other or being afraid of being eaten up, but just respect and understanding of need, then I think it would be better. Often it starts with a big love affair and it cools incredibly fast. So I've not seen so many successful corporations and I've seen so many failing that I wonder, what is it? What do we get wrong on both sides? Why can't we be more supportive to each other? But I didn't break it yet, so I don't know the answer to that.
Just picking up from where Johannes left is, if you really look at big corporations, like Fortune 500, G2000 companies, they're constantly evolving or competing, or they want to do better than a new startup, which has come up with a very different way of doing things. And I think there are three basic things which really is differentiating a startup approach and big companies. And these are very basic attributes. It's called as FAR, F-A-R, like flexibility to change things the way they want, the agility, the speed with which they can conceptualize the problem statement and the solution. And the third is resilience. Startups come up with a mindset of nothing to lose, and they're willing to experiment, willing to question the status quo and create new opportunities or new way of doing things. So I think these three attributes, flexibility, agility, and resilience, are the three fundamental characteristics which big organizations needs to very, very thoughtful manner. They need to embed these characteristics in a very. One can claim to be very agile, claim to be very resilient, but you need to go to the each interaction, either a client interaction or a very, very micro business process, and say, do you as an organization exhibit these three characteristics? I think if you start asking those questions, I think you will get the right answers, which will help you to really drive your transformation.
Thank you very much for this opening statements. Is there still a video to play or not? No? Great. Perfect. So, so as we are talking, we talk very broadly now about like how incumbents and startups can collaborate, if they can collaborate. But like when we're talking, and you know this better than anyone because you worked across multiple industries, when we're talking about the energy sector, we're facing an unprecedented uncertainty, right? So we are having like all this range of disruptive forces, like a transition to renewables, obviously. We are having the changes in regulatory frameworks, which also happened at quite some speed within the past years. We are having these emerging technologies. Which AI, for example, which we just talked about very briefly before the discussion. So as leaders in your industry, what strategies have you found to be effective in navigating this uncertainty? And how might they be applied to drive transformation?
Specifically talking about AI, it's really not so much the uncertainty, it's really an opportunity to really imbibe or adopt a technology and see how you can really apply it to some impactful use cases in different industries. So as a technology company, we've always looked at automation as a very positive change, because at the core of every transformation that we are working on with our clients, I think it's about automation, it's about customer journey. How do you make it frictionless? How much of the work processes can be automated? How much of data can be used to come up with the right way of servicing customers? So we always look at these changes as a big opportunity. So similarly, today generative AI is a very, very compelling opportunity for technology companies to really understand what generative AI can do and how can you apply it to different industries. How can you come up with use cases or business processes where generative AI can significantly deliver better outcomes with a much lesser effort. So I think just focusing the energy around each technology evolution as an opportunity, and then how can we kind of make the best out of it, I think that sets you on a very positive path. In my view, that's the first step which really helps in bringing the right energy and right thinking behind each of these changes.
But here you probably already, like automatization, that's something you implemented from the start probably because your company is so young. So what do you think, like how are you navigating the uncertainty you're facing?
So I think automation is actually something that is coming in a few years down the road. As of today, we're still in serious production of our systems. So this is something actually where when we look at, okay, what is the amount of change happening, if we look at it just strictly from an energy perspective and a hydrogen perspective, there's been an exponential growth and doubling the quantities of hydrogen that are required every year, and the hockey stick will really take place in 2027. So for us, it's how do we manage the change right now to be ready for that hockey stick moment in 2027 when the market really takes up. And the answer to that and how we build up and how do we ensure success is actually keeping it quite simple, right? And it's on the one hand keeping our customers happy. It sounds very simple, but honestly, when you're quite young and when you're building up those relationships and getting those larger deals, you want to just make sure that you're entertaining those good relationships. And on the other hand side is also just staying focused. Actually, I think there are 1,000,001 opportunities that we are always getting, and making sure that we just focus, as you were just saying, right? Startups are really good at just focusing on one thing, but the amount of opportunities that you get as a successful startup they're falling from right and left. So you really need to narrow down on, okay, so what is our core strength? It's building a modular system that can be then combined to achieving any hydrogen requirements needed. So I think that has been really our approach at the moment, and just trying to hit anything else and just to avoid firefighting.
Please don't wait for me to ask you.
I'm trying to use a picture from sports. If you see change coming, I think obviously first you need to be fit in any case, otherwise it doesn't help. But the second thing is understanding what is the driving force behind a change you perceive. Is it just that something changes marginally? Then you just need to be slimmer and fitter. Is it something fundamental? Could be societal, political, it could be technology. If you sense it's technology, then you immediately need to change the game. Because politics, you might try to stop, or you can circumvent. You just go in another country and apply the technology you like elsewhere. If it's technology, a fundamental shift, then you need to know, you need to change the game. It's not about defensive, it's not just about being a little faster, slimmer or something. You need to have different material to enable yourself, and that means you need to regroup. If it's just marginal, you don't need to change your organization. If you see it's fundamental, then you need to make sure that the defensive forces of the existing technology will not stop the change. And thus you need to protect the new stuff, organizationally, structurally, to bring it to speed and to give it the protection, the initial protection it needs. So it is a lot about the fundamental understanding and analysis. What is the driving force? What is likely the time? And we all know the typical things. You underestimate, you overestimate time and underestimate impact and blah, blah, blah. But, this understanding is so vital, because if you get it wrong and still play the defensive, whilst other people change the game, then you will lose and then you will be marginalized. So this is debate that you need to have in a company and with your clients and with technology providers. The driving force can be from the digital side, but it can also be from the hardware side. I've seen all of that. It's not all, today we always call technology only the digital part, Right here is doing technology. It's just hardware technology. And you need to understand what is going on. And then you need to draw your strategy, your organizational, your people answers, and then just see it through. And then just basically understand, are you in the defensive or are you playing the offensive? Very different game.
Maybe we could get a little bit more concrete here, and you could name an example where you recently found a solution to. Like, what was your biggest challenge lately you found a solution to?
I think in almost all the changes, which are big changes, like what we talked about, I think two important things. While there are real cookbooks and lists of all the things that you should take care when you're looking at change, I think there are two fundamental aspects. One is to really getting all the stakeholders involved. Sometimes the stakeholders may not like the change, but you just can't avoid it. You need to get everybody involved, all the key stakeholders, and you need to make all efforts so that all the stakeholders appreciate the need for change. I think that is the biggest thing, right? Once everyone appreciates the need for change, then the journey becomes much easier. And then the second aspect is being very transparent, right? I think that builds a lot of comfort in the organization and in the teams, that there is transparency, there is an involvement of all the stakeholders, even though it's a little uncomfortable for some stakeholders who are either negatively impacted or not being benefited. So, but putting that up front and really having a honest conversation, I think makes everybody realize that whatever change the organization is attempting is very critical.
Could you bring up an example from one of the industries you're serving?
Yeah, I can just talk about my own company, right?
Your own company. What problem did you solve lately?
Yeah. So I think maybe not lately, a few years ago, the industry was changing quite dramatically, right? There's lots of new technology adoption. Customers were expecting a lot from the technology providers like us. So we knew we had to do a few things differently, change the organization culture, invest in the right areas. So we built a strategy called as Mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, where Mode 1 was to focus and increase the efficiency of what we were already doing. And Mode 2 is all the new areas where we needed to invest in, which meant taking out some of our best leadership to put them together to drive completely new initiatives, which sometimes is perceived positively, but sometimes people who are handling very well established roles they have a reluctance to take up something completely where they have to start from scratch, right? So, but once everyone understands why are we doing it, why is it so important, what impact it can have on the organization in the long term, once that appreciation is there, then this change becomes fairly easy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I would use an Alpic example now. People in the last year always talked about we have a deep, deep energy crisis and the root cause is Russia. It's bullshit. It's expedited by Russia, but the energy crisis arrived much earlier. And for example, we at Alpic got extreme price spikes already in late 21, and we're squeezed on our balance sheet to place all the collaterals for the needed hedges. So when the new year, when 22 started, Russia hadn't even attacked. But we had already started to aggressively change whatever is possible on the risk side, on the financing side, moving from traded markets to over-the-counter markets, trade financing, things we have never encountered. Change, we worked day and night. And when Russia attacked, we were almost resilient already. And a lot of other companies got nationalized then later through the year or need to call for public aid. Because they too long, I think, were not clearly understanding what the root cause of the crisis is, where it would impact, what it could do. And a lot of the things we did in Q1, you couldn't do in Q2. Markets were closed. Banks wouldn't finance the same things in Q2 that they financed in Q1. So if you sense something vital, then the main thing is be extremely fast, almost act like a startup. Forget all rules, forget all things that you need to, all committees to come together, just change organization and say, it's now all on cash, forget costs, it's cash, and then be extremely, extremely agile, pull every lever, and then enjoy the day when the others start. Because then you can make business again. Because if they are under pressure, then and you then have water under the ship, then you can just take advantage of the ones moving too late. So, crisis, mastering a crisis, it's by not reading newspapers and what they believe root causes are. Look at your markets, understand your root causes, and then play it through what impact could be and how hard it could get. And then understand that you need to change priorities radically. Mm-hmm. Forget profit. Who cares about profit?
Who cares about profit?
Yeah,
really?
Who cares about profit? If you want to survive, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's like revenue is like bread. You eat it. Mm-hmm. Profit is like water. You need to drink more often than eating. Liquidity is like air. You need it every few seconds. Otherwise, you're dead. So there is a time where you forget revenue, there's a time where you forget profit, and there's a time you don't need to optimize liquidity. But that's something where you need to learn what is focus and where do I need to change focus. I moved away and leave technology now to you on this end, but it was an acute crisis, and every crisis calls for different answers, different speeds, different analysis, and at least there, I would say age sometimes helps, because not that I ever saw a war before, but I've seen a variety of crises before, but without the young folks and their creativity in tackling them.
But before coming to Vijayakumar, I would like to ask a follow-up question, because you said you did everything, you saw the crisis coming, you prevented, and still you almost needed governmental aid in the end of last year.
No, the year before.
Oh, the year, okay.
Yeah, that's what I said. We were so blessed that we were hit first by the first smell of the crisis. It was not as acute as we were worried then. But looking back, I'm so thankful that we were squeezed a little earlier than others, because it forced us to just open our eyes and look at everything from scratch. In the late days of 21, just a windy warm spell, on New Year's Eve on 21, I sat on the balcony on Lake Tegernsee with short leaves. Really warm, much warmer than even the last winter. It just helped us through the first part of the crisis, but we knew that was no structural help, that was just luck. But it was a wake-up call. What amazed me is how many companies miss, their own wake-up calls, but even worse, you don't need to go through every crisis yourself. If you see a competitor get hit by a crisis, too many companies stay arrogant and say, oh, we don't have that. Instead of saying, when could that impact me, under what conditions, and shouldn't I rather act now myself, although I'm not yet impacted deeply, but I see a storm where a ship goes in need. If I'm a good captain, I don't say I have a bigger boat. I look where the next harbor is and don't wait until the storm gets heavier. But too many people are just too much, in their own views, staying too arrogant, not early enough sensing that a storm is coming up.
Sounds like someone you would hire, Vatia. What are your thoughts?
She takes young people.
Well, young in mind counts too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, it's how do you experience? I think we're in a crisis, but actually, it's a transformation. We are in a state of transformation, and it's how do you experience this transformation? How do you lead the transformation? What decisions do you have to make so that you come up as a driver of this transformation, aren't falling behind and are suffering from this transformation? I think, for us, it's been, I think one of the success stories that we've had so far is, for sure, we've enabled a lot of fleets to go, for example, using hydrogen and instead of using other fuels, and we've brought electricity to microgrids, and we have those success stories of just bringing a clean energy access to people and companies. But I think one of the successes from us over the last months, as we've been experiencing this transformation, is pivoting, actually. So we built a factory, which is a value of 110 million euros. It's completely off-grid. It's the world's first electrolyzer factory that is powered by 100% renewables. So it's a lot of world's first, a lot of innovation, and we're the only ones trying this, so we don't even have like a reference point to it. So on the one hand, okay, first success, actually building a factory within a year. Some say we were actually too fast for the market, but we're not going to believe that because we're creating the market. So that was already the one success of having it there. But also then pivoting from the initial strategy of we're going to mass production of small-scale solutions to then pivoting to no, we need to go into series production of large-scale solutions because that is what the market demands. The market wouldn't absorb these kilowatt systems. We need to go into the much larger megawatt systems. And I think this was we caught it just in time, right? Because the pivot from the small scale to the large scale it could have been the end, right? So we're still managing this faster growth than the market while driving the market and creating it, but I think that's kind of the point of being a first leader.
And what's your biggest challenge in that? Is it like you're definitely an industry leader, green hydrogen is the future, but still you're still, like when I Googled your company, I saw like you're still in the red, etc. We briefly talked about this. So is it like, what's your biggest problem? Is it technology? Is it like still the physics of hydrogen, or is it the political environment?
So I think it's multifaceted, right? We, as a technology provider, we see where our technology needs to go, and it's not just the technology. We see where the cost needs to go. We see where the capex needs to go because the price of green hydrogen is dependent on the price of electricity. So we can only have agency over the price of our equipment, and then we will need to also have the environment and the infrastructure actually to have cost-effective and low-cost electricity. So to your point of what are the challenges, well, I wouldn't say it's a technology challenge. I think we are going as fast as we can, and we're the first ones who have ever done this, and we are actually moving quite quickly in getting our first megawatt-size system currently now being commissioned in the Bioenergiepark in Germany, and then have already sold a handful of them to Germany and also other countries. So from a technology perspective, I think that's pretty clear. I think the struggle is actually, so we built a factory, we're ready to go. It's a factory actually at full capacity with even more production lines that we have planned, 24-hour shifts, could go into the gigawatt scale. So we have a gigafactory. However, the question is, well, is the market ready for it? And then here comes the finger pointing of, okay, so we want green hydrogen, we have these great ambitions, but who is actually going to buy the hydrogen? And then comes the question of, well, what is hydrogen? How can I get the hydrogen, my project finance, if this renewable hydrogen hasn't been defined, which we then fall into the policy question. So I mean, in 2020, we had this definition of hydrogen that took about, until now, February 2023, to finally define it. Is it perfect? Far from it, right? But at least now we have this definition, which will now unlock the final investment decisions of hydrogen projects, which will then get the factories up and running, but still doesn't actually guarantee this 100% utilization of a factory, which then holds back from your revenues.
But tell me, why do you build your plant in Germany of all?
Exactly.
If you want to have cheap energy, I would go to the US, including subsidies. If I want to have clean energy, I would go to any of the Scandinavian states and not to Germany. So if you see, the will to accept risk and innovation, I would not go to Germany. So what precisely was the reason why you decided to do such an innovative thing of all states in Germany?
So the reason actually it's, in Germany we chose Saarbeck and NRW because actually it has more renewable energy than it consumes. So it has an excess of renewable electricity. And we knew that our production site needed to be 100% local renewable electricity, which is actually quite rare in Germany, of course, right? This situation is, we had an Excel sheet of 50 different locations. We almost went to Hamburg because they also had a lot of renewable energy accessible, but we decided no, Saarbeck, next to FH Münster, we have the talent, and we also had the state support from NRW.
But why not Malmö or Oslo or...
I think it was, so my co-founders are German, and so my co-founders are German, and so there was always this idea of we want to have it in Germany.
Wrong pick.
But no, it's okay. I'm bringing in the diversity, so it's not a problem. I take a large, a big responsibility on my shoulders. Okay. But to your question on why Germany, it's like we had to get started at some point as well, and the net zero industry, the subsidies that are coming in right now in the United States, the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, that just came this year, right? Okay. So the red carpet only got rolled out over the last months. So up until then, fair. Because when we were building the factory, we started already in 2020. Okay. Right. So back then, Germany was one of the main ones.
All right.
But now with
it's not the only one. It's a blueprint, by the way. Huh?
I think it's trying to invest in your company now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Johannes asked exactly the right question. Now with the US subsidies coming up, will you build your next factory in the US?
So I think it's an option. We are having those conversations. They're knocking on all our doors. The question is, we could do it. Does it make sense to do it right now? Maybe not. And I think it's a question of also establishing the right kinds of partnerships. Do you want to start greenfield? Do you want to take over something? Do you want to actually associate yourself with someone else? So we are having the conversations, and it's an attractive market. And as a publicly listed company, there are only so many things I can say.
How is it for technology? I'm just curious. Is it easier to apply new technologies in the US or in Asia than in Europe? Or is it for you very comparable, the markets, when you bring new technologies in?
I think it's fairly uniform, I would think. Okay. If I have to really differentiate it a little bit, in Europe it's a shade more challenging than the rest of the world, especially technology change. Otherwise, I think US generally is much more receptive to technology changes. I mean, either because of the Silicon Valley culture or startup ecosystems and things like that. I'm sure Europe is also changing fast, and India is dramatically changing. Like the way India has adopted digital technologies in payments and in all forms of government is at an amazing speed, far better than most of the Western countries.
How can you help? How can technology providers like HCL? How can they help disruptors like Enapter to scale up?
I think what technology has helped scale pretty much every industry. Like if you take banking, for example, just by having different technology channels, omni-channel, to drive customer onboarding and allowing customers to transact everything through digital channels. Very different from the brick and mortar model. Really is converted the banking into a non-linear kind of a scaling opportunity. And I'm sure that's applicable to all the industries. I'm not particularly familiar with your industry. And I'm sure when we spend some time, we will create enough opportunities for any industry to scale using just the basic building blocks of technology.
Sorry, I wanted to ask another question, but I think I'm going for a different one. Yeah. When we talk, no, sorry, I have to start differently. So I think as a technology solutions provider, HCL has the potential to drive innovation in the energy sector, right? Like, I mean, you are already in the energy sector. We see that technology is like the main point in there. I'm just wondering, how can the company develop business models which are aligned with the sector's transition to sustainability, and what role can Alpic and Enapter play in that?
Yeah, I think a good example will be what we did for E.ON, which is, again, it's in the public domain, so I can talk about it. I'm sure you are fully aware of it. I think the whole customer journey was completely modernized and transformed. The way customers interact with the utility, the way customers can choose their options, enabling them to choose more sustainable options. So we created this platform which enabled this whole digital transformation from a customer interaction perspective, from their billing perspective. So all of that became a very frictionless operating model. And that helped scale, and that gave a very good customer experience. Customers could exercise their choices much more effortlessly. So it's more in how the business is getting executed rather than the core technology, which is in the energy segment, I would think.
So the customer experience, that's exactly what Vaitiya mentioned, what's so important.
Yeah.
But you're shaking the head.
It was extremely helpful what companies like HCL did, but that was the early stage of digitization in energy, I would almost say. It was just a digitization of customer interaction, like in any other industry. What is truly now behind climate change and things like Vaitiya is doing is, when I started my career, we had a couple of 100 generators supplied to a grid where you could almost manually drive the system. The system was almost driven manually in some control centers. In the future, we'll have billions of devices connected. From not just solar panels, but a lot of use cases will be supplied. And that is impossible if you don't digitize the total grid, and if you don't digitize the total interaction between all appliances. No human being can balance that system of tomorrow. It's only through technology and likely AI. Not that I personally truly understand what's doing there, but we need all of that machine intelligence. Otherwise, climate technologies are set to fail. They need the support of the technology. And for my former company, I know that they are now deeply digitizing the grid as a next step. And the very next step is in digitizing all the interactions between all appliances hooked to the grid. What I'm worried again is that we will have a hard time getting it done because we are continuously worried in privacy. The same we were like COVID. Rather have a few people more die than being a little faster with your digital. And I'm afraid the same thing will happen again. We have still no rollout of smart meters in Germany. In Italy, I think, in Sweden, we have the third generation of digital meters.
So you're saying
nothing.
Politics in the European Union is falling behind, and it's not the technology sector not providing fast enough?
it's not fair. Society is falling behind. Politics is very often just doing what society wants. And the aging society is fundamentally, oriented to defend a status quo and protecting their peace of mind instead of tackling change and imposing themselves to some vulnerabilities. But we're talking of the most deepest fundamental crisis of mankind with climate change. And our answer is a continuous debate on privacy. We don't get it. Priorities are different. And but and I don't like this blame on politics. We need a wake-up call for society. And I miss that, including the question in the opening round from this French young person. I don't get it. Why in France, for example, the young generation is protesting against a change in pensions. When I was hired my first job, I didn't know what a pension is, and it was not my biggest worry. And if I at least have something in my mind, I know that pension is predominantly the cost of the old generation, probably that I will have to pay later. So I think, somehow we need to get society off these dosing pills where we are just daydreaming and giving Sunday speeches on these, we are the lead in climate change and blah, 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 if the weight would only follow us. If you look where the real change happens, it's in India, in China, in other societies, while we give the best speeches on the matter, but don't apply so much.
So transforming society to transform industry.
Revolution of the young generation is needed. I just don't get it why they, okay, we have the majority in all elections, fine, but I don't get it why there is not more uproar. And I don't talk about Fridays for Future alone, or the last, or the very last, or the next very last generation. I'm talking about this, the average young person, and not only in universities, but across the workforce. Why don't they drive society harder? Why don't they engage? They don't engage in politics, also in Brexit. They didn't even go to the poll. So this young generation needs to wake up. If that is an intergenerational dialogue, I would say get a little more aggressive.
I think it's a question of education and agency, right? Why are people, and thank you for your points, I agree that it is a societal wake-up that is needed. I think that there is a deep behavioral change that is needed, and I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of it will be worse when we transition towards climate-friendly solutions and efficiency, and I think people need to understand actually everything will be better. Really, we just need to all get on this boat and go there. And instead of everyone rowing in different directions, and some people are just believing in the climate doom. I mean, it's a total. I mean, pardon my French, but it's a shit show right now. Honestly, people need to just get a grip and start moving towards that same direction that we all need to go to. And I do think it is a question of education and agency. And I think that what makes me quite upset. Is when we see people, protesters, right, scientists, handcuffing themselves or gluing themselves to things and barricading either entrances as a form of protest. I think people, whether it's Fridays for Future, but also just Extinction Rebellion and all these movements that are so extreme, but why are people doing such extremes and possibly ineffective ways, is because they don't know what else to do. This is desperation. I think that if we were enabling them to understand how can they get involved, what can they do, and feel that actually a lot of people are backing them up and are part of this transition with them and part of that movement, then we would be having a much more collaborative approach towards the transformation.
Look at the 68 generation, not that I love them so much, but they took over control in society. And it's not so long ago. Gluing yourself to a picture will not likely change the world. Just take over. The old generation is also not moving much. If there was just more activity, I think it's easy to take over this society. It's just you need to want to do it. And you need to engage in your workforce, in your jobs. You need to talk everywhere. You need to build groups.
Same way how I think a lot of positive things happen on the gender side. You just need to get going. Instead of debating what the final solution is, start doing the first steps. We're talking too much. I'm also so bored about this debate, how we get to final 2050. I could care less. Why don't we talk about what we do tomorrow? It's much more interesting than 2050, because it's anyhow all bullshit what we say on 2050. That we will see some changes coming, and nobody knows what's coming, and who cares? We need to get going. Next steps are interesting.
But if you're naming China or India as like better examples how to deal with the change, how to deal with privacy, it's not the young generation driving the change there.
I don't know, but you know that better. I think the society is young. If you look the average age, society is much younger than our society.
In India, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, in our company, of the 225,000 people, 30% of them are under the age of 25.
Oh.
So their ability to bring about change is just humongous. I mean, whether it is learning new technology, whether it is adopting to different ways of working with clients, and just the emphasis on learning, upskilling, and kind of growing their capability. I think there's this huge potential that they have, and that has a huge potential on the organizational success.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Thank you very much. I think we covered a broad range of topics. Before I'd like to go into the Q&As, I'd like to ask you how you're looking on the year ahead. What's your biggest challenge, and what makes you also kind of hopeful, maybe?
I think the whole macroeconomic environment is not so conducive for a lot of things in today's scenario. So I think as a technology services industry, we believe we can do what we call as zero-cost digital transformation. We can help customers be more efficient, bring more automation, bring the right cost solutions, which will fund the transformation journey that our clients are looking for.
How big of a topic is AI?
AI is like it's a part of every conversation these days, and it's a very positive conversation. How can you get the right use cases, which has the highest impact, and show me the art of the possible? That's the conversation. That's what a lot of our clients are challenging us with. So we are kind of putting all our best brains together to come up with the right use cases for different industries on how generative AI can help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What's your outlook for the year ahead, right here?
So for us, it's deploying our first large-scale electrolyzer and then building and shipping the next ones. I think those are pretty huge milestones because it's a fundamentally different product, and that's a big milestone for us as well. And I think what makes me optimistic is, I think it's twofold. On the one hand, is just reminding myself to be grateful for being a part of the change and for being a part of those who are making things happen. We can always do more and move faster, but at least we are part of the positive change. And so I think it's something that I just ground myself in every day because it gets hard. And also to remind ourselves that no one has ever done it before and no one is doing it as fast as we are. So as complicated as it is and as big as the challenge it is, then we're doing our best, and that's as good as it'll be as a first mover. So I think it's just keep pushing. Oh, yeah.
I would say it's moving again from very short-term thinking to longer-term thinking again. Last year in the energy industry, from oil and gas to power to grid, was crisis every morning to every night. And it was a wake-up call, admittedly, also for me, reminding us, if you don't have good answers to the short and the mid, forget the long. No society will tackle climate change if the lights are off and the homes are cold. Then, first need comes always first. So never forget again, be certain that whatever you do provides resilience for the short and the mid. But now it's also important to open your eye again and don't get hooked up on the short and the mid, but shift the picture again to the longer term. So what are the strategies that we need to
deploy in a variety of industries I'm working in, to get a longer-term resilient business model. And but I liked, I can't pronounce his name, this Welsh lord there. I think a brilliant speech on balancing all these different horizons, and to get the right balance again is for me the challenge and the need for this year.
Mm-hmm. And anything that makes you hopeful? Oh, okay. Well,
Yes, my family.
Okay. Always
Great
a good
people.
answer. I hope your wife watched the live stream. So thank you all for this great panel, and we're going for the Q&A now. Oh, there's already a question over, like the woman in the back was the first one to raise her hand, I think. Oh, yeah. Thank you. My kind of
hello, respected panelists. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights. My name is Bhargavi Agrawal and I'm from India. And my question would be from Mr. CVK. But before asking the question, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate HCL Technology for the collaboration with IIT Dhanbad, where HCL is using data science for sustainable energy. So I would like to mention this because we talked a lot about sustainable energy. So I have two very small questions. First is, last year, HCL Technologies changed its logo to HCLTech. Also, the purpose statement that was released, and it was mentioned by you in the media coverage. So the purpose statement mentioned supercharging progress. I would like to know two things. First, since HCL has already been into the industry for past 32 years, so what is the motivation and the reason behind the change of the name and the logo after 32 years? Also, what is the context behind supercharging progress? Thank you.
Okay. I think this is very specific about HCLTech, but I will definitely talk about it. I think we always had a very strong purpose as an organization, which was about enabling people, being very innovative in bringing technology solutions to our clients. So we wanted to have a very sharper articulation of our purpose statement, which is to bring the best of technology and our people to supercharge progress for our clients, for our people, for communities and planet. So why change now? Why change the colors from blue to purple and blue? I think it's just the demographics of our organization has changed quite a bit. I mean, we have so many young people. Purple represents innovation, a little more ambition, whereas blue represents a lot of stability, quality kind of attributes. So we wanted to bring the mix of both. And that was the real theme behind change. And we really are supercharging progress for our clients because our clients have so many different business objectives, and we provide the right solutions which accelerate their journey to achieving those objectives. So supercharging progress is a positioning which has energized the organization, which is kind of really bringing our purpose right in the center of every conversation that we are having with our clients and all of the stakeholders.
Thank you. I saw so many hands being raised. But where's the? Do you have a? Yeah. Just bring it to whomever you see.
Thank you. Hi, this is Margot from Mexico. So Johannes, I have a question for you. You were telling about, like, if you see a storm, you should go to, like, stop and wait until the storm is over. How can you recognize that background? I have a company, I have been running it for 5 years. So how can you know if the storm is coming or it's only a short rain? How can you know if you're being arrogant or you are just like, it's a short rain and you can continue? I think it's like a very thin line. And how can you get like the sensibility to know like, oh, in this kind of rain I will sink, or this kind of rain I can take it and I can continue?
There is no, again, it's analytics, and there is no guarantee that you get the answer right or I get the answer right.
But if you see on the crisis on the European power industry in late 21, the root cause was a fundamental problem in French nuclear industry. And it was visible that it cannot be overcome in a few months, and it would get even worse. It was at the same time retirement of other capacities. Although the storm was on, other countries were stupid enough to retire. And you saw that there is a fundamental short happening. And if you see that, fundamentally there is no new supply possible, because on power it's on grid or not on grid, and new dreams don't help. So it was a pure analysis of an unbalanced market that cannot be balanced within few months. And then the likelihood of a fundamental storm was extremely high. And so it was not that there was just one pipeline broken or something, because there you can calculate how long it takes to fix a pipeline or to substitute something. If it's a fundamental supply-demand unbalance that physically cannot be balanced, then the analysis is not so difficult. But you need to understand what's really behind it. So if it's just a crunch on oil prices, that will not hit you fully, because it's a balance thing that happens everywhere. So if you have some knowledge on markets, you can sense whether something goes deeper or longer. But so not just look at prices, look at root causes for prices and abilities to change. And then sometimes you may get the answer right, and sometimes not.
There's I'm not sure, like the hands are going up so fast. So maybe the people with the micro organize it.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I study political economy of Europe at the LSE. I was slightly frustrated by one of the things that Johannes said. You blame society, not politics, and you ask why young people don't drive change and don't engage. I reply to that change is inherently political, it's inherently legalistic. If politicians don't see the benefit of appealing to the young, and the young don't engage because they aren't being appealed to, we've got this really dangerous negative feedback loop. I guess what I'm trying to get at is politics is important, and how can we get politicians to talk to the young? Do we need some kind of system change, institutional change? What do you think?
I have no inherent science on your question that I could give you. I think it's first a conviction. You need to build a root cause engagement in younger people, just to engage in something consistently, and also respect democracy. So you need to go to these boring local politician meetings that start at 6 and go to 11. And yes, you need what Helmut Kohl said. He just sat the longest of all. That's the only reason he survived some of the crisis, just because he was just sitting on his big butt. And you need to tell people how the system works, that you cannot shortcut it, but you can take it over. Since engagement in the whole society is so low, if one generation truly engages heavily, I think it is possible to, we have so few people engaged in parties. You don't need so many to take a party over, really, if you just engage. And politicians then, if you engage, they will listen. They have just one truly vested interest, that is to get re-elected. And if they sense there is a fundamental thing going on, they get active. So maybe I'm too optimistic there, and maybe I expect too much from the young folks. And I'm not saying that we, the older, should not also do things, but.
Yeah, I was just quickly on the back of that. we kind of briefly mentioned like the demographic aspects, especially in countries like Italy. We've got, aging societies, demographic aging, and actually, who are the politicians going to appeal to? Well, they're going to appeal to the older people because that's who that is where the majority of votes are. Obviously, you shouldn't be allowed to vote when you're 2 years old, but in many countries it starts at 18. Maybe we should introduce an upper. I know it's absolutely not feasible, but an upper age limit. Just a thought.
We have.
Okay, we go for a vote on that. Let's see.
No worries, we still have half an hour for questions. So we have a gentleman over here who raised his hand vividly since the beginning, and a gentleman over here, and and also a gentleman over there.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Sachin. I'm a Sri Lankan, currently studying in the UK. My question is kind of pigging back on the concept that since the climate change is a big problem, and your opinions about how everyone should change their minds and go in the same direction. But my question is, throughout the history of mankind, nobody has been in the same page ever. We've been through war, we've been through different movements, gay movements, women's rights movements. We do all that while having conflicting opinions, and that helps in most cases. So do you think that, I agree to the fact that this is the biggest problem that we have all faced, but still do you think that people will all get to the same page? If yes, how? If not, what do you propose to do in a conflicting environment?
Yeah, thanks for your question. I don't know if I have the perfect answer or the secret sauce to this, but I think it's about recognizing that we are all on the same planet and that the planet has planetary boundaries. And so then the question is, then how are you making decisions? Are you making it from a resource perspective? Are you making it from a carbon intensity perspective? And these are the shocks that we will all feel. There will be things that when you look at the wind patterns right now and the shifts from a weather pattern perspective, it's the change is already happening now, and the change will only keep accelerating. So it's how are we making those decisions, right? Is it so right actually to keep moving so fast and to respond to markets and financial pressures and allocate resources and spend resources when actually maybe we should reflect on what is the right decision, which infrastructure is the right one to build in the mobility perspective, and then have a longer term approach. So I think the question, I would approach it from what resources do we have available as a planet, and then to make decisions based on a purely carbon intensity perspective. So, and also to recognize what resources are available in certain places. I mean, when we look at where the major transformations will take place, it will take place in India, it will take place in China, where luckily there is also a lot of renewable electricity available. And that can be cheap, and and there's also a huge manufacturing opportunity there. This is where mass production is taking place. And so I think that from a national and planetary perspective, there are resources to take into consideration. And I think the one thing that I hope that we can agree on is not only the carbon intensity, but also at some point the carbon tax.
I think it's only if those that apply changes have a competitive advantage, then everybody will get jealous and move. Otherwise, it's like, we all saw the movie Independence Day. When the aliens come, we will align, but that's probably the only case. On all other cases, I share your view, I'm skeptical. So we need to prove that there are not just long-term saving the world advantages, but that there can be, if you do it smart and agile, that there can be competitive advantages of moving. If we do that, then I think a lot of other countries will say, well, it might not just be to help others out, it might just be if I'm not moving now, I'm left behind, and then I'm losing again. So we need to create this competitive drive that there is something to win. As long as we only talk about, the world is going under, we're all dying. By the way, the earth will never die, just get rid of us, and then it continue and heals itself. So it's not, we don't need to be worried on the world, just on us. But we need to find a positive momentum. As long as we only have a negative story, and as long as we always have a dire debate and people
glue themselves to something and are in tears. I don't think that the average Fred and Joe across the world gets motivated because people glue themselves to something in Berlin. It is, we need a positive story, a positive momentum. And I still hope that technology will bring something to the table, new appliances, new solutions will bring something to the table, science will bring something to the table. But we need to be pragmatic. If you do it in a pragmatic fashion, and there I'm a little bit jealous on our American friends, I think they do it, again, extremely smart. They don't, have the descriptive way of the Europeans. What color of hydrogen precisely in which year is accepted, and how many pages do you need to fill out? Just say, we want to win. We want to have the leading technologies in this country, and we want to win. And everybody who helps us winning gets money. That will drive so much creativity and greed to the table that I think they have a real chance of winning. Whilst we in Europe are sitting, we have a very difficult task, we need to save the world, it's so difficult. And I don't think it's a very motivating story.
So, can we give the micro to the gentleman over here? Sorry.
Can I try speaking, and if you can hear me till the mic?
Oh,
no,
yeah,
it's coming, it's coming. We just need to move a little faster with the mics.
Thank you. I'm Nadir Godrich from India. I agree with you that technology can save the world, and whatever we do to encourage technology is great. So I commend all of you in developing these technologies. And Vijayakumar, I'm very fascinated by your work on electrolysis. And I think green hydrogen is the only solution for hard-to-abate industries, particularly the steel industries and many others. But it's important to have a winning technology. And how confident are you that there is a winning technology? Electrolysis has been around for a long time. How much improvement are you making? It seems there are 2 points: the capital costs per unit of hydrogen and the electricity per unit of hydrogen, which of course has scientific bounds. So how close are you getting to the scientific limits on the energy required? And are you afraid of alternative clean hydrogen technologies? The Japanese are working on coal-based hydrogen with carbon sequestration, and it seems to me you could have biogas-based hydrogen from reforming. Are you confident that your technology will compete with these?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Absolutely. I think that we do have the potential disrupting technology in electrolysis. I think that innovation is great, but that we also need to respect the timeline that we have, right? So while we could keep innovating in different ways of creating renewable hydrogen, we also need to look at what are the options that we have on the table today that can actually scale up, because innovation is one part of the challenge, but actually scaling up is a much greater one, and industrialization is a great challenge here. So I think that in terms of cost, where are we at? We are today depending on the cost of electricity, right? So some of the green hydrogen that we're producing today is cost competitive with some of the diesel generators that are being installed, because the cost of electricity is virtually zero. From a larger macro perspective, I believe that from a capex cost of our systems, we will be able to be cost competitive with other sources of hydrogen within the next 3 to 4 years. And so we will be ready for sure by 2027. This is why is there such a hockey stick? It's because the factories are running, the capacity from production capacity is growing, and also from the project capacities in terms of installed electrolyzers. So I believe that this will be coming in the next 3 to 4 years. And then in terms of product roadmap, our focus is always on driving down the costs and also improving efficiency. And we're on track. So absolutely confident.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Hello, my name is JJ Aguina. I'm a multi-country European, HSG alumni, and Symposium alumni, so I know a lot to say about a topic, and I think it's a fantastic time we are living now with poly crisis we're talking about, and as you correctly mentioned, Johannes, it makes me think of '68 when I look around me, particularly the situation in France, as you have mentioned it. Now, you're been talking, and a young person from the LSE has reflected on that as well, about the young generation. Johannes, I saw you jump when somebody says we have a lot of people aged lower than 25 years. Now, I know of very big companies, big employers in Europe who have a lot of very young people, yet they're not getting more efficient, but less efficient. So, I mean, I don't want to blame anybody, but we do have a problem, and you just mentioned it as well, saying, what are we doing about it? My impression is it is cultural. If I look at what you said about India, for instance, there seems to be a big gap. Now we talked about the US, there seems to be a big gap. Can we, to cut it short and to come to a question, export the spirit of St. Gallen, which suggests a solution to this problem, to this cultural problem, to get use more innovative, to get used to participate and not to wait for the age of 62 or 64 to have a pension. How do we get youth moving? I think that's really the core of the problem.
Was that a question or a statement?
How can we enact this, that youth will wake up? As Johanna said, I mean, this seems really to be a major problem. Maybe they're too well off. Maybe it's a cultural problem. Maybe.
Okay, I think we got it. Whom of you would like to jump in?
I think it might have something truly to do with culture, and we all know how difficult it is to change a culture. Even the Chinese failed in the Cultural Revolution. They're still Confucians. I don't know. For me, we talked before, for me, for example, the Canadians, I love Canada, the Canadian spirit. They are a great blend of this pioneer, can-do mentality, plus ecological, social, cultural behaviors that some of my American friends miss. And they are a young generation with immigration and with a lot of innovation. But how do you orchestrate that? How do you do that? Again, has maybe something to do with immigration. Do we attract the right immigrants in Europe, or do we happen to have the immigrants that decide to come along? And maybe we have to have both, if we can't avoid. But we need to do something. We need to renew. We need to bring fresh blood in to change the culture. We debate. We spend too much time on talking about some problems. Yeah, that are also there, that are very interesting. I don't want to name them, otherwise I'm in the next newspaper. But we talk too little time upon how do we enable and spirit a society to get into the move again. And it's not that our European societies were incapable. We have great knowledge institutions. We have done a great 20th century in parts in the second part of the 20th century. How what we have built up in Europe, across Europe, in industries is very impressive. And maybe we need to go deeper. Where did we lose it? Why did we at some point start to not have the same competitive drive, this innovative competitive drive, this willingness to embrace change? What precisely happened? And I don't know when we have to put it. Is it somewhere in the 70s or 80s? Also in my industry, not much got built after that. Not much new happened then. It's somehow as if the engine fell out of the car, and we're just rolling from the speed that we had, and we're sitting there and debating nice to have problems instead of tackling how do we get the engine running again. But I don't have the answer. But I thought I'd come to St. Gallen to learn the answer, not to bring the answer.
I'd love to take two more questions. There's a. There's a woman raising her hand, and there's someone I took the microphone from.
Okay, but I have the mic.
Oh yeah, you have the mic. But then, if you could, okay.
That helps.
Okay, my suggestion is I'm taking 3 questions. After you give the question, you're giving it 2 people are behind you to the person. Yeah, you, the one raising the hand. And there's one woman I'd like to give the mic as the last question.
I'll be quick. So first of all, Johannes, on your point on the 68 generation, I'd like to remind you of Eric Clapton, who said, if you can remember the 60s, you were not there. But that's a different issue. My question to the panel actually is it truly an advantage in a world of robotics and AI to actually have a lot of young people, or is actually having an inverted demographic pyramid an advantage going into the future that we're actually looking at?
Maybe I'll take a chance. So, I don't think so. I think having a lot of young people is an advantage, no doubt. Because today, because of AI and all the generative technologies, knowledge itself is getting disrupted, right? We always believed that knowledge was as you kind of learn more, you become more knowledgeable. But that fundamental assumption itself is getting questioned. So do we need to give us the importance that we gave for experience and age? Is it really relevant? Or it's getting a little bit redefined. There is some aspects of experience and knowledge that is relevant, but not everything as we are traditionally known. So I think younger demographics is definitely a big advantage, the way I see it, especially with the technology changes.
Thank you. Yeah, to the young man over there.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm Austrian and Bulgarian, and I currently lead an organization called Sigma Squared Society, where we unite and empower young entrepreneurs from around the globe in 30 countries, ranging from founders in the climate to education, healthcare, hardware spaces. And I'm actually a huge fan of the Fridays for Future movement, and I became a fan of the people gluing their hands to the streets as well, for the simple reason that my aunt, who really did not care about climate yet, actually got pissed about it. And so we had a conversation where she started learning about what it means that, what the things that are happening actually mean for us and for our future. And I think a huge problem that I see currently very often, I talk to a lot of corporate leaders, a lot of senior leaders, a lot of activists as well, but activists don't really listen to senior leaders. Senior leaders don't really listen to activists. And I think when we're at a forum like this one, what really matters is intergenerational leadership and also the exchange that we have. And also in my case, I have been a founder in the tech space for the last couple of years, but to a big extent it was possible because I had mentors and people that were supporting me and had the experience that I lacked at the time, and I think still a lot to learn. So I wanted to ask Johannes Tyson, what do you do to make intergenerational leadership happen, and also how do you empower young people in building and being the change that is needed?
On the last generation, let's agree to disagree. On the other question, I think is looking for leaders that see it as their main task to develop people, instead of leaders that look for people that help them to develop. So you need people that are really out there like fishermen, to find the right breed and help those people to develop. There are these leaders. If you promote those, you get an environment where good people hire better people. If you hire people who are just playing on the defensive, protecting their own jobs, then you get a dormant society in your company. So have the right attitude in leaders. And that is you only detect by talking to them, not by testing. I'm a bit skeptic on all those tests with blue and white boxes. I think it's in the end, you need to meet, you need to talk to people, you need to understand what drives them, if they are curious. So I also look for leaders. Every time I meet someone that wants to get promoted, I usually ask them, what are the last 5 books you read? That's an interesting conversation. Very often it stops even before the first. And it shows, that they lack any openness for something that is beyond their box. They may be the great mathematician or something, but they're not curious. They're not looking for cultural insights. They're not looking for anything out of their box. And the likelihood that they see something is remote. So ask the right questions and take the time to talk, and maybe then you find the better leaders.
Thank you.
Last question over there.
Yes, hi, my name is Ann-Christine Zobel. I'm a professor here at the University of St. Gallen. And maybe it's a good closing question because I actually want to bring the discussion back to one of the topics that was used to set up this panel, which is this supposedly perfect fit between innovative agile startups and the resourceful incumbents. And I have studied collaborations between energy utilities and clean tech startups for the past 10 years. So to quote Johannes there, I've seen how these hot love affairs went to very depressed marriages. So in that context, my question is, first for the startup perspective, Vijayakumar, for you, what mode of collaboration are you looking for to scale up quickly? Is this equity? Is this a piloting? Is this co-creation? Is this just to become a supplier? And then to the incumbent perspective, what are you looking for? How would you like to collaborate with a startup? And then maybe to everyone as a final question, what's the best to combat climate change? And how do you need to work together for the most climate benign solutions?
So I assume this question goes to all three panelists. Maybe we can do this as like the closing question, and you could all answer this very briefly.
Yeah. So maybe I'll kind of respond to the last point. What is one single thing that we can all do? In our company, we launched what is called as a sustainability school, which gives an opportunity for all the 225,000 people to understand what they can do in their own lives, which will make a positive impact to make the planet from a sustainability perspective. I think just the education and awareness, most of us tend to externalize this as something that the society needs to do rather than seeing what you as an individual can do. I think if we can bring the focus to what you as an individual can do, then I think the impact that all of us can create in solving some of the challenges will be humongous.
Thank you.
So I think for us, we have tried pilots, we have tried demos, and that was actually like our first experiences in trying to establish those collaborations, and that did not work. I don't know if you had similar experiences, but there's not enough skin in the game, actually, from either parties. And so what we have found successful, so we have a strategic investor, and through strategic investments, this is how we've actually established much deeper collaborations. And so this is with Johnson Matthey, they're a chemical expert, and from their perspective, they're getting to know our core technology, they're diversifying, and what we are gaining from this is faster industrialization of our electrochemical process, but also learning from a recycling process, because we haven't really talked about circularity, but that will be another big topic there. So I think strategic investments has been the most successful way so far.
Thank you.
I would say in the first part, avoid the love affair phase. Immediately do it like in a mature relationship, do an Ehevertrag, which is not meant for success, which is meant for failure. Because very often that prevents failure, because people then talk about what their hopes are, what their ambitions are, what they're willing to bring to the table, and when a relationship has failed. And if you define that early on in the beginning of a relationship between a startup and a mature company, then you avoid this hormone phase where you love each other, but you never talk about what the other ones really want. And then you drag along, and at some point it's like a bad marriage. We never ever talked about the needs of each other, and there was no agreement on anything. And after the love phase is over, there's nobody willing to invest anything in the relationship. So do it mature, and then maybe with a good Ehevertrag, and maybe then it survives much longer than the love marriages. And on the climate side, I would say always assume that there is one more solution you don't see. It's a religious saying from a philosophic sense. So never pretend that you know all the answers, and thus you just need to deploy them. continuously assume that there is something organizational, technology, politically, that you don't see and that you're driven to see. And if you find the next one, assume there's another one missing. So continuously work under the assumption it's not the end of history, it's not the end of technology. There can be something changing. Keep agile, stay open. And if that is the attitude, I think, if everybody has the attitude, the chance of new breakthroughs on all ends is much higher than if everybody assumes we know all the answers. It's solar, it's wind, it's, I don't know, nuclear, it's whatever, whatever someone likes, and all is known, and we just need to do it, and then the world is safe. I think assume we don't know it, assume there will be new answers, assume that you need to be curious for them, then the likelihood of finding it is better. And the last one is a repetition also, find a positive story, and then write a positive story. Throw all the negative stories in the fire. They don't motivate people. Nobody's burning their ships, changing their Heizung in the Keller because of a negative story. Write a positive story. Tell people there's something in for them where they will live better, cleaner, have fun. Tell them a nice, positive, motivating story. And then maybe they burn their ships and move.
Thanks for closing the panel, Johannes. Thank you all for participating. Thanks for the great last question. Thanks for all the other questions. I'm so sorry we could not take in all questions, but there's now lunch for 90 minutes, so you might find our panelists over there and you might catch them and ask the questions that have not been asked yet. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here, for engaging in the discussion, and we see each other at 2 p.m. in the Aula for the talk with Nikolai Tangen. Thank you very much.